When I first came to America, I suffered from culture shock. I wasn't used to the big spaces, the big buildings, and people obsessed with accumulating material things that they don't need or rarely use. The sales manager in our company drove a sedan, a sports car. His wife owned an SUV. They had a powerboat, 3 snowmobiles, a condo in the ski resort where he had 4 pairs of skis to match different snow conditions. As someone who grew up in a modest environment, I was astonished by the size of his house and the collection of toys. In sales meetings, he aggressively pushed salespeople to sell more so they could earn more. He believed in the philosophy of more. He kept sales on a growth curve for about 2 years, but not all salespeople agreed with this philosophy, and the turnover was high. As a matter of fact, one salesperson complained in an exit interview that the manager's vision of more didn't extend to a noble purpose. Over time, I realized that the sales manager was under a lot of stress since he couldn't control his spending habits, and he compensated by eating and drinking too much, especially when it came to entertaining clients. I remember one day when I traveled with him to Buffalo to visit some clients. On the last day of the trip, we closed a big sale, and he decided to invite our client to lunch to celebrate. The client asked me if I had ever seen Niagara Falls, and I said no. He suggested we take a quick side trip to see the spectacular tourist attraction. So after lunch, since our plane left at 5 p.m., I thought that the plan was realistic. As we entered the restaurant, I noticed a beautiful black and white photograph of the spectacular waterfalls. I was very excited about standing exactly where those photographs were taken. The sales manager ordered a huge amount of food and drinks, and soon they both got drunk, and as the designated driver, I was amused by their growing exuberance and verbosity. It turned out that they both played football in college, and they talked about the games they won, the girls they chased, and those that got away. At one point, I looked at my watch and realized that their need for exploring the past had quietly shut the door on the possibilities of me seeing Niagara Falls. After 3.5 hours, it was clear that the customer and the sales manager were too drunk to drive. I grabbed the customer's car keys and put them in my pocket without him noticing. They didn't put up a resistance when I shoved them both into the back seat of the car, and soon they fell asleep. So after dropping off the customer at his home, I drove to the airport just in time for our plane. 6 months later, I decided to quit, and I started Selling Power magazine. And a year later, I gave a speech at a conference of financial planners, and I shared this little story with a very insightful consultant who worked with a number of wealthy clients. And he told me, Gerhard, 80% of my clients subscribe to the philosophy of more. After they make their first million, they want to hit 10. After they reach 10, then they're gone for 50, and then for 100 million until they're billionaires. As they earn more, they spend more. So I asked him to share his insights, and he said, I tell my clients, don't go for more, go for meaning. More is the philosophy of the cancer cell. And happiness comes from knowing your boundaries. I asked if that meant that shooting for less was more desirable, and he says no. The key is to set boundaries with your heart. Your mind is the GPS, and your heart is the destination. Know what's enough for you. People never think about what's enough until they had enough disappointments. Know what gives you the most meaning, and let that be your guide. Inner peace is a greater asset than the sum total of the possessions you chase but don't really need or hardly ever use. Years later, I learned that the sales manager's marriage fell apart, and he developed more and more health problems because he had gained over 80 pounds, and after his divorce, he had to sell his home and condo and moved into a small apartment. So the wheels came off his lopsided version of the American dream. He got depressed. He lost his job. He later moved to LA, to join a multi-level marketing company selling vitamin supplements. So the last time I heard from him, he told me he got an electric car, he lost weight, he stopped drinking, and he also enjoys rollerblading. He said, it's a rather simple toy, but it keeps me healthy, it gives me balance, it gives me joy. His insights reminded me of the French artist Henri Matisse, who once wrote, "What I dream of is an art of balance, of purity and serenity, devoid of troubling or depressing subject matter, a soothing, calming influence on the mind." My advice, don't run with the herd that's governed by the philosophy of more, and lead your life based on a philosophy of enough.